I never thought I'd return to Pine Grove Valley. Not after 15 years. Not after leaving behind a life of endless farm chores and long summer nights listening to crickets in the fields. But life has a way of pulling you back to your roots, especially when those roots are under attack. The old farmhouse stood at the end of a gravel road, weathered but still strong. It had been in my family for generations, passed down from one Johnson to the next. Now it was mine. But instead of a homecoming, I walked into a battlefield. Mr. Jenkins, my mother's lawyer, met me on the porch, a thick manila folder in his hands. His face was grim. "I wish I had better news," he said. "Your mother wanted you to have everything, the house, the land, but there's a problem." I frowned. "What kind of problem?" He hesitated before handing me the folder. "Your mother fought to keep this land until the very end, but the HOA claims she signed it over to them 5 years ago." I nearly dropped the folder. "That's impossible. Mom would never do that." Jenkins sighed. "I know, but according to these documents, the land now belongs to the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association, and they're not wasting any time staking their claim." A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. The farm had been my mother's life, her legacy. She had worked through sickness, through pain, refusing to let go. And now, with her gone, someone had stolen it right out from under us. I glanced toward the fields. Survey stakes with orange ribbons lined the edges of our cornfield. New markers that hadn't been there at my mother's funeral 3 days ago. Someone had been planning this for a long time, and they had no idea what they had just started. The knock at the door came sooner than I expected. I had barely started unpacking when the sharp rap against the screen door made me turn. Standing on the porch was a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her stood 2 men in polo shirts with the Meadowbrook Association logo stitched neatly over their hearts. "You must be Helen Johnson's son," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. "Karen Thompson, president of the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. We were so sorry to hear about your mother's passing." I shook her hand out of politeness, though something about her tone made my skin crawl. "Thanks," I said slowly. "But what brings the HOA out here? Mom's farm isn't part of Meadowbrook." Karen's smile tightened. "Well, that's actually why we're here. There are some covenant violations we need to discuss." I blinked. "Covenant violations? This farm has been here since 1920. Your neighborhood has only been around for, 10 years? 15, she corrected smoothly. "And while that may have been true once, your mother never officially contested our annexation of this property. According to county records, this land falls under our jurisdiction now." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "That's not possible." Karen handed me a document with my mother's signature at the bottom. I stared at it. It looked like Mom's handwriting, but something about it felt off. "We'll give you 30 days to bring everything up to code," Karen continued, gesturing toward the barn. "That means removing unauthorized farm equipment and updating your fencing to HOA standards. After that, fines will start accruing." The 2 men behind her smirked, their eyes flicking over property like vultures circling a fresh kill. I clenched my fists. Something was very, very wrong. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, Mom's old records spread out in front of me. Tax forms, medical bills, land deeds dating back to my great-grandfather. My mind raced with questions. Why would Mom sign away our land? Why would she let the HOA take everything she fought so hard to keep? Then I remembered the filing cabinet in her office, the one she always kept locked. I rushed upstairs, my heart pounding. The key had always been on a chain around her neck, the same chain the funeral director had given me with her personal effects. With shaking hands, I unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside, hidden beneath old photo albums, was a leather-bound journal with "Keep Fighting" scrawled on the cover in my mother's handwriting. I flipped it open, my breath catching as I read the first few pages. Entries detailing years of harassment from the HOA. Complaints about her tractor being visible from the road. Threats over the height of our corn. Then, the most chilling part. Survey markers keep moving overnight. Property lines shifting on paper. HOA trespassing while I'm in chemo. I don't have the strength to fight them anymore. God forgive me for failing to protect what my father and his father built. Tears blurred my vision. Mom had known. She had known they were stealing the land while she was too weak to fight. But she hadn't given up. And neither would I. The next morning, I was sitting in Sarah Winter's office, Mom's journal, and the HOA's fraudulent documents spread across her desk. Sarah, a sharp-eyed attorney known for taking on big developers, adjusted her glasses as she examined the papers. "This is criminal," she muttered. "These signatures don't match at all." I pointed to the document Karen had shown me, and look at the dates. This one is from when Mom was in the hospital. She could barely hold a spoon, let alone sign a contract. Sarah exhaled sharply. The HOA has been planning this for years. They've been slowly annexing land, expanding their territory. Your mother was just the last obstacle. How do we stop them? I asked. We file criminal charges. Fraud, forgery, illegal land seizure. But I warn you. She leaned forward. The Meadowbrook HOA has deep pockets and friends in high places. This won't be easy. I clenched my jaw. I don't care. We fight. Sarah smiled. Good. Then let's get to work. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. Power outage. Sector 7. As regional supervisor for Northeast Power Authority, my job didn't stop, even when my world was crumbling around me. I pulled up the power grid map on my laptop. Then I noticed something that made my heart race. The entire HOA development Meadowbrook, including their new luxury homes, was connected to Substation 12. And guess who had to sign off on any new power expansions of that area? Me. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. The HOA had stolen my land. They had no idea that I controlled their power. And they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. I barely slept that night. The realization that I controlled the power grid for Meadowbrook changed everything. The HOA had stolen my land, but their entire development depended on my approval for future power expansion. They thought they had trapped me, but I was the one holding the leash. At sunrise, my phone buzzed. A notification from my security cameras. Movement detected. 5:42 a.m. I pulled up the live feed, my gut twisting. 3 men in construction vests were hammering "No trespassing" signs along my cornfield. I threw on my boots and stormed outside. Doug Wilson, the HOA treasurer, smirked as I approached. "Morning, neighbor." He planted another sign, this time 50 feet inside my property line. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded. "Marking HOA property," Doug said, tapping the sign. "The board voted last night. This land now belongs to Meadowbrook." I clenched my fists. "Those documents were forged, and you know it." Doug laughed. "Then prove it. In the meantime, we break ground next week." He patted the stake in the ground and walked back toward his truck. I watched him drive off, my blood boiling. They weren't just claiming my land. They were acting like they'd already won. I needed to strike first. The retaliation came fast. That afternoon, a crew showed up with bulldozers and chainsaws. I barely had time to grab my phone before the engines roared to life. They were cutting down the century-old maple trees lining my field. "Stop." I sprinted toward the workers, waving my arms. "This is private property." Karen Thompson stood nearby, arms crossed, watching with a smug smile. She didn't even pretend to look surprised. "This is HOA property," she said sweetly. "You'll need to take any complaints to the board." I was shaking with rage. "Sheriff Miller is on his way." Karen's expression flickered for a second. Then she smiled again. "We're simply preparing for development. The land has already been rezoned." Sheriff Miller arrived minutes later, stepping out his patrol car with his usual grim look. "What's going on here?" Karen handed him a thick folder. "Our permits are in order. The county approved this expansion last month." Miller flipped through the papers, frowning. "This says Lot 156. He turned to me. "Your family's land is Lot 27. Karen's smile faltered just for a second. Miller snapped the folder shut. "Until this is sorted out, All construction stops. Now, I exhaled. It wasn't a victory, but at least they wouldn't bulldoze my land today. I had bought myself some time, but the HOA wasn't done. That night, my power went out. Every single Meadowbrook street light was still shining, except my house. I grabbed my flashlight and stormed outside, my heart pounding. The power lines running to my farmhouse had been cut. Karen and Doug were waiting at the edge of my property. Having some electrical issues? Karen asked, fake sympathy dripping from her voice. You did this. I growled. Doug unrolled a new property survey map, one that conveniently cut my house out of its own power grid access. Turns out your home isn't properly connected to county infrastructure, Karen said. We'll need to conduct an inspection before it's restored. You mean after I hand over my land? She shrugged. Your call. I clenched my fists. They thought they had me cornered. They had no idea I was about to end their entire operation. With no electricity, I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the storm cellar, the only place I could think clearly without being watched. The wooden shelves were lined with Mom's emergency supplies, old farming tools, and dusty crates. I ran my fingers along the rough wooden boards, remembering the night she and I had sat down here, waiting out tornado warnings. Then I saw it, a rusted metal box wedged behind a loose wooden panel. Curious, I pried it open. Inside were yellow papers, old surveys, and photographs of my grandfather standing with county officials. Then I found it, a 1952 contract, signed by my grandfather and a rural electrification board. My breath caught as I scanned the document. In perpetuity, the Johnson family retains override authority for any utility modifications affecting their granted easements. I read it again, and again. It meant we didn't just own the land. We owned the power grid rights over Meadowbrook. I controlled their electricity. And the HOA had just declared war on the one person who could turn out their lights. The next night, I walked into the Meadowbrook HOA meeting with Sarah Winters at my side. The room was packed. Karen sat the front, flipping through papers with fake confidence, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. We need to discuss enforcement actions against certain individuals who are interfering with community improvements, Karen announced, eyes locked on me. I stepped forward. Actually, I said, my voice carrying across the room, we need to discuss how this HOA illegally stole 2,100 acres of my family's farmland. The room went silent. Karen's smile tightened. That's a ridiculous accusation. I pulled out a USB drive and plugged it into projector. A hospital record appeared on the screen. This land transfer, I said, pointing to a document supposedly signed by my mother, was dated July 17th. But according to these hospital records, I clicked to the next slide. She was unconscious in surgery that day. Gasps rippled through the audience. A gray-haired board member named Tom leaned forward. Is this true? Karen's face paled. This is a misunderstanding about dates. I clicked to another slide. This is my mother's journal. She documented the HOA harassing her while she was dying of cancer. She fought you people until she physically couldn't anymore. The room turned against her instantly. Tom turned to Karen. You assured us this property acquisition was legitimate. It was... Karen's voice was shrill now. We've already started developing. We can't stop now. I pulled up one final slide, the 1952 power contract. Here's another problem, I said, my voice calm. As regional grid supervisor for Northeast Power Authority, I reviewed your development plans. I placed my employee ID on the table. Meadowbrook's expansion requires 3 times the current power capacity. I looked Karen dead in the eyes. And the only person who can approve those upgrades is me. The room exploded. Homeowners shouted questions. Board members whispered urgently. Karen's husband, Jack, jumped to his feet. You can't block us from getting power. Actually, I said, flipping to my grandfather's old contract, I legally can. Karen stood, her hand shaking. You think you've won? We'll see what a judge has to say about that. The doors swung open. Sheriff Miller stepped inside. Actually, I just got a warrant for fraud and illegal land seizure. He locked eyes with Karen. Karen Thompson, you're under arrest. The battle was over, but I wasn't done yet. Karen Thompson stood frozen in place. Her face drained of color as Sheriff Miller took a step toward her. "Karen Thompson, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and illegal land seizure," he repeated, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Homeowners who had once blindly followed Karen now whispered amongst themselves, uncertainty flashing across their faces. Karen's husband, Jack, leapt to his feet. "This is absurd. You can't arrest my wife based on baseless accusations." Sheriff Miller ignored him. "Karen, stand up." Karen's hands curled into fists, her entire body trembling with barely contained rage. "You set me up," she hissed at me. I gave her a cold smile. "You set yourself up when you forged my mother's signature." Jack shoved his way between the sheriff and his wife. "You can't do this. You have no idea who you're messing with." Sarah Winters, my attorney, stepped forward, completely unfazed. "Jack Thompson, you use your position on the zoning commission to illegally change property lines. You push fraudulent paperwork through the county offices. That makes you an accomplice." Jack paled. "You have no proof." "Oh, we do." Sarah pulled out a folder and handed it to the sheriff. "County clerk records. Multiple boundary changes, all signed by you. Each one shifting my client's land further into Meadowbrook HOA's control." Jack snatched the papers and scanned them, his face going redder by the second. "We're not done," I added. "The 1952 power easement contract means I have final say over any power modifications in this region." I turned to the crowd, making sure everyone was watching. "That means the entire Meadowbrook expansion is officially dead in the water." The crowd erupted into chaos. Homeowners started shouting questions at Karen, at Jack, at the other board members. "You told us everything was legal. You stole land? From a woman with cancer? You mean our property values are going down?" Karen's nails dug into the table as the sheriff pulled her to her feet. "This isn't over," she spat. "I'll be out by morning." Sheriff Miller chuckled. "I doubt that." As the door slammed behind them, I turned back to the HOA board, who now looked like they had seen ghosts. I leaned in, my voice calm. "Your move." The next morning, Meadowbrook was in complete disarray. News trucks lined the streets, reporters swarming homeowners for statements. Karen's arrest had made the front page of every local paper. I sat at my kitchen table, flipping through a folder of new legal filings from Sarah. "This is bigger than just Karen," she said, sipping her coffee. "With her and Jack out of the picture, the HOA is going to implode." I raised an eyebrow. "How soon?" Sarah smirked. "Within a month, at most. Homeowners are already demanding emergency board meetings. They want out." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was Doug Wilson, the HOA treasurer. I picked up. "Doug." A deep sigh came through the line. "We need to talk." That afternoon, I met Doug at the Meadowbrook Community Center. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "Look," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't know about the forgery. Karen and Jack, they kept a lot from the board." I folded my arms. "And yet you stood on my land last week, hammering in no trespassing signs." Doug winced. "Yeah, I messed up, but the truth is, Meadowbrook homeowners don't want to fight. Most of them had no idea what Karen was doing." "Then dissolve the HOA?" I said flatly. Doug looked up sharply. "What?" I leaned forward. "You want to make this right? Put to a vote. Dissolve the HOA. Let the homeowners control their own properties." Doug hesitated. Then he nodded. "I'll set up the meeting." 2 weeks later, the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association voted to dissolve itself. Karen's absence had shattered their trust, and without her manipulations, the community turned on itself. The remaining board members resigned within days. That same week, I got the official court ruling. All fraudulent land claims were reversed. My mother's 2,100 acres were fully reinstated to the Johnson family. I stood at the edge of my farm, looking out at the golden fields that stretched for miles. The land was mine again. I could almost hear my mother's voice in the wind. "You did it." Not everyone in Meadowbrook had been an enemy. A week after the HOA dissolved, a group of former Homeowners Association members knocked on my door. Elaine Foster, an elderly woman who had lived there long before the HOA formed, spoke first. "We were wrong about you." I studied the group, half a dozen homeowners, all looking embarrassed. Doug Wilson stepped forward, hands in his pockets. "We let Karen manipulate us. We should have fought back sooner." I nodded. "You should have." Elaine swallowed hard. "Is there any way we can fix this?" I considered their faces. These people weren't my enemies anymore. "The HOA is gone," I said. "But if you want to build something better, something fair, you're going to have to earn it." Elaine straightened. "How?" I smiled. "I have an idea." 2 months later, a new community group was formed, one that replaced the corrupt HOA with something better. The Pine Grove Valley Community Association was built on fairness, not power. No more forced regulations. No more land theft. Just neighbors looking out for each other. I stood by the barn, watching as the last remnants of Karen's failed dream were erased. A construction crew took down the Harvest Estates billboard that had once stood at the entrance of my property. In its place, they hung a simple wooden plaque. "Johnson Family Farm, established 1897. Sarah stepped up beside me, hands in her pockets. "Not bad." I smirked. "Not bad at all." She turned to me. "So what's next?" I looked out over the fields, the land finally safe for future generations. I thought about my mother, about the lessons she had taught me, even in death. I took a deep breath and smiled. "The real power in this world isn't about money or control," I said. "It's about standing up for what's right, even when you're standing alone." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I knew one thing for certain. My mother's legacy would never be stolen again. And if anyone tried, they'd learn the hard way exactly who they were messing with.